I think it's largely accepted that the third season of Star Trek The Next Generation really got the ball rolling, and is when it really found its footing and got really, really good. Yeah. However, it starts off with right off the bat, it's a Wesley episode, more or less. Later on, they would craft some episodes that were better for Wesley, but Evolution is basically Wesley had this science project that goes awry and causes all the trouble and all this sort of stuff. But initially, they're there to conduct an experiment. There's this scientist there, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There won't be this stellar event will not occur for another 200 years or something of that nature. And this scientist is very obsessive and dedicated to it. And he does kind of strike up a bit of a kinship with Wesley because they're both, into the science and all that sort of stuff. And so, okay. There's the immediate positives that they, change the uniforms that are much better in the form they are from going forward. I mean, later on they changed stuff, But anyway, this one was the better one. I do recall there was a story that Patrick Stewart hated the original uniforms because basically it was all one piece, and they had these stirrups in their feet to keep them constantly tight, and smoothed out and everything. But it was throwing his back out. So you can imagine his spine is in that suspension between his feet and his shoulders of the suit doing that to him. So eventually the next time around, at least for the men, they would wear, shirts and pants, and that was the deal, and that's how it went. And for the most, and of course, when it's a one piece like leotard or something like that, it always looks better on women. I don't know if they kept the stirrups in there or anything like that for the women, but basically, and the stylings of the shoulders and the collar was just better than the one they started out with. So, all right, and right off the bat, also Beverly's back, so you got that going for it, and which is fitting because it's a Wesley story. So of course, and then there's they're at odds a bit here because she's checking up on him. She hasn't seen him in a while and all that, and now he's trying to cover up this trouble that he suspects he's the problem. So in the midst of this grand observational experiment they're conducting and whatnot, everything goes awry with the ship, and it's like akin to they've uploaded a virus. Everything's failing. They check, and the computer's constantly telling them everything's fine when it obviously isn't, and things break down and all that. Well, ultimately, this is because of Wesley's science project that he did, where he had these nanobots that he was experimenting with, and for some dumb reason he decided, hey, once I release them, then I'll see how they really go or whatever. And the evolution is they evolve, and they escape out into the ship and they start corrupting all the systems and everything. So, and at one point and I guess it does work, eventually he sets traps for them like mice and all that, and then has a conversation with Guinan. I think this is all my fault, and Guinan doesn't tell anybody anything, but I mean, the ship was at risk. That would force her to do something. It's not my place. I think you should, advise him to tell the captain and everybody what happened, all that. Eventually, of course, tells his mommy, and they, and the rest. But this presents their problem of they're noticing that the nanobots have evolved so far that they've become a sentient species. Now, they're miniature robots, and they're learning computers, and they're developing as they go. But they're the ones causing all the problems, so they're going to miss out on the experiment if they can't fix the ship, But Well, the scientist is losing his mind over this, and he says, look, just irradiate them and then be done with it so that we can get the ship back and get back to the experiment before it's too late. And they say, well, you can't do that because they might be a sentient species. So that's the quandary. It's a bit flaky on that point on things. Of course, they have data. They've already done the whole thing with data and everything. But here you're talking a matter of minutes that this happened. But that's the speed at which they go. And does it make the question? It does seem like they could have isolated them, that sort of thing. But nevertheless, the scientist takes it upon himself to wipe out a good bit of them, and they're horrified, So the remaining nanobots attack the ship and attack him and all this stuff. So then they decide we need to open a dialogue with them. So they allow Data to allow the nanobots to basically take possession of him so they can talk to them directly, which could have been the worst thing they ever did. But of course they talk it out and everything works out, and they even forgive the scientist. I don't think so. But anyway, so then they find a planet for them to go live on, and that's that. Well, of course, this is one of those things where, hey, there could have been a follow-up, and boy, was this a mistake, and they evolve into these, worse threat than the Borg or something like that. But, it's all very sweet and quick, and a quick little, well, who are we to decide what is life and all that sort of thing. And that's about it. It's not a great episode. It just isn't. But this is what begins the third season. So the second episode is much better, and it, of course, it's actually pretty simple, but nevertheless it plays out very well, and it's a Data episode. So of course, usually the Data and Worf episodes tend to be the best, but. Essentially, he's got this mission. They discover there's this colony on a planet that was disputed with this other alien race, and they claim it, and the Federation agreed to that, and so it's theirs, and they're preparing to colonize it. Well, they've discovered there's a human population living on it, and the Federation's like, what? They didn't even know anybody was there, so the Enterprise is dispatched to deal with this. And they say, how can there be, and it's a heavily irradiated planet, so they didn't think any humans could live on it and all this sort of thing. But they've managed to adapt to it, and so there was this lost ship that disappeared, and they never found out what happened to them. Well, they landed on that planet, and these are the descendants of those people. I guess they're great-grandchildren or something of that nature. I forget how many generations it's been. And so they got to go in there. Well, there's a lot of them there. They've created quite the little colony, and they don't have, the Enterprise wouldn't be able to remove all of them because it's just too many and all this stuff. So they're trying to negotiate for time. The Shellyak, they're called, or no, get them out or we'll do it, all this type of stuff. And Data goes down and tells them, you guys need to get ready, pack your stuff, we got to get you out of here. And but the main leader says, forget that, we're a proud people, we built this whole thing, and we're not leaving just because some aliens think they can kick us out and all this sort of stuff. And it goes back and forth like that. Meanwhile, there's a girl who clearly gets a crush on Data, of course. But ultimately, what's interesting is, there's different factions that think, well, I think the Data's right, and then the other factions say stay true to the leader and their culture they developed and everything. And he's asking them to just abandon everything they know and that sort of thing. And the leader is just dead set against it. Even attacks Data and stuff like that. And he's like, hey, he's just a machine. Why listen to him and all that? But ultimately, Data has to demonstrate what they're really up against. And so he just takes out his phaser, blasts their irrigation system, which they're so proud of because it's rather extensive, and destroys it with one shot. I mean, the energy pulse just goes all the way through, all the way up a mountain and everything, blows it all up. And he's demonstrating to them this is a very simple handheld weapon. The Shellyak have something far more massive than that. and they're just going to nuke you from orbit, and you will have died having never seen your enemy, you know. And they're determined. They don't care about you. They don't see you as on par with them. They just want you out because this is their planet, and they'll just get rid of you. So after seeing that demonstration, that was it. The leader just had to admit defeat, and it's okay, we're evacuating. Meanwhile, Picard had to learn some tricks and whatnot for the negotiating. So you get that interplay that a lot of the Starfleet diplomacy that was a hallmark of Star Trek, you play out every now and then in different episodes, and they do that pretty good. And they figure things out. Picard's figuring out, you know, not the entirety of the culture of the Shellyak, but he realizes an edge in how particular they were about the details of the treaty. And of course, he would find ways to outmaneuver them to where they had to give him the time he needed to request other ships to come in so that they could transport the colonists out. And so there it goes. It's a very, again, rather simple, and yet there's complexities there, and it plays out very well. And ultimately, of course, yes, the girl is very attracted to Data, and say, well, you just leaving? You're not gonna, you know. Of course, he's an android, but you know, it's one of these interactions that later develops Data as he goes. But you know, it's a cute little scene there. It's too bad for the girl; she'll have to find somebody else. But nevertheless, it's a very good episode. And simple, again, you know, not the greatest one and all that sort of thing. But in comparison to the first one, it's leaps and bounds better than that. And a lot of times, you know, less is more, you know. So anyway, there you go. Season 3 for Star Trek The Next Generation. Off to an interesting start, to say the least. But, but second episode, I think, sealed the deal. For what would be a defining season for Star Trek The Next Generation.